Welcome to Focus on Business, a podcast show for photographers with me, your host, Jane Goodrich. I'm talking to successful photographers so you can learn from our experiences and have the business of your dreams. So join us and let's focus on business. Hi, so I am so excited today on our show. We have Nichole Lauren, who's a fantastic wedding and portrait photographer. But she's not only that, she's also an attorney, a business coach, podcast host, extraordinaire. Wow, you're very busy and very successful. Hi, Nichole. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jane. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Yes, I am a podcast host, an attorney, a photographer, all the things.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot. So we'll definitely talk about how you manage that later in the show, but tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you are, your background, why photography, even why, or maybe in the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So people get very confused when I tell them I'm a photographer and an attorney. So I get this question a lot, but I started my photography business back in college, started getting into photography. I had a DSLR camera back in middle school. So I was always the friendship historian. I was always the person in the friend group taking all the photos and annoying everyone and saying like, okay, come on, let's take a photo. And I don't regret it. No regrets one bit. I have all these amazing photos of all my friends growing up and it's great. But around sophomore, junior year of college, I had tried to do my photography business in like high school and it was kind of for fun thing. But then around junior year of college, I decided, okay, let's try it. Let's give it a go. And let's do senior photography. And so I was in a prime location for that. I was on a college campus and I had plenty of people to photograph on the college campus who were graduating. And so I really had very humble beginnings. I created a Word document flyer. It was before Canva even existed, I think. It was back when InDesign was a thing and I didn't like that. So anyways, a Word document flyer, and I posted my photography sessions for like $50 each. And it was very, very cheap. And I got a lot of group sessions that wanted to come find me for that very cheap price. And that's kind of how I got my start. Yep. So very humble beginnings, but I really enjoyed senior photography. And that's really how I got my foot in the door for getting paid for sessions. And then I decided that I really liked couples photography a lot. I had done some engagement sessions and I was like, I think weddings is just like a great place and I would love to get into those more. So I started second shooting for other photographers that same year and then the next year as well. And then I hosted my first styled shoot. I started building my portfolio that way. And so around 2017, I started the business basically in 2015. And around 2017 is when I booked my first wedding client. So it took about a couple of years to get started into that. And then now I am full-time in business as a photographer right now. But in between all that, I went to law school. So it was always a side thing for me. Photography, my business was always on the side. And I just kind of always believed that it could never be a full-time thing. It was never on my radar. I never thought that was a responsible thing to do. I never thought that was what I should be doing, so those kind of things were always kind of holding me back. But I also had this really big love for law. And so in high school, I did speech and debate and mock trial. And that was kind of what sparked my interest in law. I had always had a great passion for it. And I knew in the back of my mind, being an attorney was something I kind of would want to do. And so right after college, I went to law school. And again, this whole time I had the photography business on the side. That's kind of how I paid my way through law school as well, which is a huge blessing. And then, Monday through Thursday, I'd be in the books and reading the cases and arguing the points. And then Saturdays would come around and I have my creative outlet time at weddings. And it was just such a dichotomy of two very different worlds, but it was such a fulfilling and exciting time because I was very passionate about both of those fields, and I was able to do both, which was really exciting. I graduated law school during the COVID era in 2020, so it was kind of a crazy time to get started in the field. But I took the bar exam that summer. I passed the bar in that same exam, and so I started working pretty much right after law school at a real estate law firm here in South Carolina, and I love the job, great firm, great people, really enjoyed it. But it just became really apparent to me that the life of the 9-to-5 and working for someone else just wasn't feeling fulfilling and right for me. And I'm never one to say that everyone has to go full time in their business. I don't think that's everyone's path. But for me, it just was not working. And there's a lot of different factors that contributed to it, but I got to a point, which is almost about 2 years ago now, where I was kind of feeling like I was in a rat race and just kind of going through the motions. And I got to a point where I was, if today was my last day on earth, would I be happy with how I spent it? And the answer was no. The answer was no. And I wasn't thrilled and jazzed about every Monday coming around, you know? So I decided, I went to my husband, I was crying. I had this moment, I think I need to do this. And he's like, well, let's make it happen. Let's do it. And that was the first time I ever felt like, oh, I could actually quit my job. I could actually do this if I wanted to. There's nothing holding me back. I can actually do this. And so, yeah, it's almost been 2 years since I've gone full time, matched and exceeded my attorney salary in the first 4 months, which was amazing. And yeah, it's just been crazy. It's been crazy to see how it's just unfolded, how God's blessed my business. And it's just been awesome. So yeah, that's kind of the long run around of how I got here, but it's a cool story.
I love that. I think also what's interesting is, when we go into photography, we think, oh, it's just all the creative outlook. I'm actually in my head thinking, law school, some of my best friends are lawyers and they can write. I did a project where we renovated a kid's playground in my town and we had 2 lawyers. Their emails are so well written and so persuasive that I was like, hey, can you write some of my client emails? I don't know if people have said, oh, it's a waste, but I don't actually think it's a waste because I think you take parts of what you learn in different places. It would actually be an added benefit. Communication is really key in running your business. That's such a great story.
Thank you.
If you were to travel back in time, I'm not saying that you would change anything because everyone has a journey to pass. But if you were like, hey, 2015, Nichole, what would you sort of tell yourself?
Oh, I love it. I don't think I've gotten asked that before. I would just tell myself that you're going to make it and it's going to be great. And just keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's so easy, especially in those first years of business, to doubt yourself constantly. And I think I heard it. I don't know if this is an actual statistic or if I'm making this up, but I think most businesses fail within the first year of their business or the first 3 years of their businesses. And I think that's so true. There's so much doubt, so much overwhelm. I remember starting a business and then thinking, is this it? Am I doing it right? Is this what it is? Like, I don't, you kind of just doubt yourself. And so, yeah, I would tell 2015 Nichole that it's going to be all good.
Yeah.
You're going to be all right. You're going to kill it. It's going to be great.
Well, I think that even the fact that you're saying to yourself, are you doing it right, is key. In our industry, sort of any creative industry where you're like, oh, well, that looks easy. I'm going to go do that. Part of what I've seen and the reason why I create Pixello in this podcast is to kind of be almost like a sounding board of, it's okay, people have made mistakes, but just let's help the new people not make those same mistakes, right? And we're not hairdressers, we don't go to school and we don't apprentice. I'm glad to hear that you second shop, because then you actually get a really good idea of, do you like it, or what are they doing right? You can learn a little bit more about the business process that way.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
So I know you photograph international and you travel to different weddings, sort of destinations. But if you were to, I'm gonna sort of change your job a little bit. If you were only to be a local wedding photographer and you had to move, what would be the first thing that you did? And I'm going to say you're going to move to, I like just picking it, Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. You mean like starting in a new place and what I would start doing?
Exactly. Like in 3 months, you are moving to Chicago.
Oh, so many ideas. Okay. First of all, I would start building network. Networking is huge. Being able to connect with other wedding vendors, specifically venues and planners in the area, is huge. I feel like the best way to network is to serve your network really well. So not to go into a networking event to think, what can I take? What can I get from these people? But how can I show up for this new community that I'm in and serve them really well? So one of the ways that I like to do that, especially when I was first starting, is hosting styled shoots. I actually started hosting styled shoots for other photographers in more recent years, which is really fun. But when I was first starting my business, I would host styled shoots in order to connect with other vendors and also build portfolio, which is another added perk.
Yeah.
But primarily, the purpose of styled shoots, I think, should be to make connections, because there is so much to be said, first about having a community that you can lean on in this new space that you're in, but also being able to build that referral base where people know that you're a quality lead, they can send their customers your way, and that you're going to treat them really well. So yeah, networking is my very first thing. If you are in a new place, if I was in a new place, it would be to find either a networking group, to attend events, or to start doing styled shoots myself and inviting other people. The other thing that I definitely recommend, obviously, is SEO. So a big way that I built my business in the beginning, so I went to Clemson University. The way that I built my business in the very beginning is through blogging a ton. And so I still, like, the SEO that I did through blogging for Clemson is still working for me even today. I get so many inquiries from people that are in Clemson, even though I don't target that area anymore. I really don't. I don't put out a lot of content that's targeted towards Clemson anymore, but I still get a lot of organic reach from that, because that's the power of SEO and how long reaching that type of content is.
On that note, so you mentioned networking. I actually call it and relationships, sort of building the relationships. I actually love the idea of a styled shoot, because I think one of the things that, of course, the florist is going to want gorgeous images, and how better to do that for a wedding venue. Then you're win-win. You're winning because you're getting a portfolio build, and you're also making a connection, and they're winning because they're getting gorgeous photos. So I actually really like 100%.
That. I talked about this in another interview that I did. Every business owner is focused on themselves. Like, that's just human nature. Like, we're focused on what can we do to better ourselves. And so if you're different and you focus on the other business owner and you say, like, hey, I'm new in this community, what can I do for you? How can I help build your portfolio? That's huge. Yeah. People don't do that. If you can be that and actually genuinely serve others, it's going to go a long way for you.
Yeah, I had a little sticky note that was on my desktop for the longest time. It was called Hope, and it was help one person every day. And whether it was through business or just life, it was just my little motto. And I just think that if you're going into it saying, how can you help serve them or help them? I wouldn't say you're going to be a doormat. You're not going to walk in there and be like, I'm going to give you a $5,000 shoot for nothing. Right. But it's just more like thinking, like, not just one way. It's both ways.
Yes. There's something to be said of obviously having boundaries and not just spending a ton of money to get connections. I don't think that that's probably the best way to go about it. But if you can approach any interaction with someone else in a very kind and service-oriented way, it goes a long way.
Yeah. I've been shooting for 14 years, and the people that are my best sort of connectors or referrers, I would never have guessed. Like, I would never have guessed. Speaking of marketing, we just talked a little bit about relationships and then also SEO. If you had to pick like one form of marketing to solely rely your business on, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I'm going to be so unpopular right now. It would be YouTube. It would be long form content. It would be YouTube. So my two top marketing platforms are YouTube and my email list. I mean, I think email list technically would be my very, very top. But if I was talking about content in terms of social media, it would be YouTube. First of all, your email list is something you own, which I'm sure everyone knows that, and it's been marketed that way. But your email list isn't something that's going to crash when Instagram goes down or when Facebook is having a problem. Your email list is going to be there. And then the same thing for YouTube is that it's long form content. So it's the same as SEO. Essentially, YouTube is a search engine. It's not really like social media as in the way that Instagram is. YouTube content works for you long beyond the time that you actually post. We know that because there's years and years of YouTube content that still gets trending even today.
Yeah.
So if there's something I could tell your listeners is that they should start a YouTube channel like yesterday. It's such a great platform to be on. And I was held back from being on there for so long because I thought I had to be an influencer to be on YouTube and share all of my personal stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But YouTube is so, so good in terms of teaching and educating and growing your reach. There's something to be said about the long form content that works for you rather than Instagram, where it's kind of like a hamster wheel. Like you're constantly having to reinvent. Like every 24 hours, like the content's going to die. And YouTube is not like that. personally, I found it a lot more freeing, a lot more exciting, a lot more creative. It's just, for me, it's an easier platform to show up on, and it's more bang for my buck kind of thing.
Yeah, that's sort of the ROI. Like if I'm going to do a video, I hope it lasts longer than the reel that I just spent 3 hours doing. But I also like YouTube as well. The tip for anyone listening is, even if you don't like being on camera, you can create voiceovers with gorgeous shots of your clients, and even just having a behind the scenes of the studio on your website, so your clients are pressing play and on your website that little bit longer, it can really help. Because, by the way, Google owns YouTube and they love their own platforms. So it all interlinks. If they know that Nichole Lauren Photography YouTube channel is linked to her website, they're going to be like, oh, she's using YouTube. She's actually in business. You know, some of it is like just a signal to Google that you're still in business.
Right.
I one time did not change my website for like 3 years, and I wondered why I dropped. That's because they thought I was dead. Or like, didn't update my Google business profile. So
yeah, so important.
So are you practicing law at the moment, or no?
I am. Yes, I am. I keep up my license. So I just renewed it for this year, last month. And I actually help small business owners. So it's kind of come full circle, which is really exciting. For South Carolina business owners, I'm licensed in South Carolina. And so I actually help business owners draft contracts. I also do entity formations in this state. I do some light estate planning as well. I'm also a notary, and I do some deed things. So some real estate things are still kind of trickling over. But for the most part, it's really just small businesses, entity formations, and contracts. And then I have a contract template shop for creatives. So that's nationwide, but that is called legallycreatives.com. I have contract templates I'm adding to it daily, but that's kind of a way that I like to serve people beyond just the state. It's been really, really rewarding having, you know, so now my attorney stuff is kind of like my side job, if that makes sense. So it's been really fun having both of those things and see how they come together. And I have found that there really is a gap between the legal worlds and the creative worlds. There's really not a lot of combining of the two. It's very separate. I find that when business owners seek out legal counsel, it's not someone who's actually creative and knows where they're coming from. It's more like a corporate type thing. Yeah. So I found a really cool way to serve my fellow business owners through this too.
I love that, because you're right. I mean, we are creatives. We are not necessarily going to be black and white serving it. And so how do you balance that? I'll definitely put Legally Creative in the show notes too, because we all need contract templates.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This is a lot of work that you're doing. Do you outsource anything? How do you balance life at all these multiple jobs? A never-ending quest for that balance, if it ever exists.
I get this question a lot. People are like, how do you do it all? First of all, I don't have kids, so that's a big part of how I am able to do more things. I do have 2 fur babies, so they are my little kids, but I don't have, you know, human children. So I think that's a big part. I'm full-time, so I do have the whole day, and that's really nice. My husband works outside the home, so he's not distracting me or anything like that. So that's kind of nice. But I don't have like a proper team member that's in the day-to-day of my business. I do outsource certain things. For instance, I have a consistent second shooter that's on my team, and she's like my intern basically. And she's actually a family member that I've trained over the last 2 years, and we work really well together, and she's awesome. I have someone like that that's working with me on actual wedding days. And then in terms of like the day-to-day, I really don't have anyone consistently. I do have an assistant who, if I have one-off projects or things that I just don't want to spend time on, I'll send them their way. Really not anything like week to week. It's more just whenever as needed. So I have a few things to say about how to manage it all. But the first thing that I do is I time track. It might sound a little silly or a little bit, really that helps, but time tracking is so helpful for me, and being able to clock in, like right now as we're speaking, I have my toggle open and I'm clocked in. And so that really helps me stay on track. I see that the timer's running, and I know that I have a certain number of hours in a day that I have to get stuff done. And so if I see that I'm clocked in, it helps me to stay on track. Another thing that I like to do is having themed days. Mondays and Wednesdays are usually my interior inside business days. So I'm working on the back end of my business, ideating, thinking through things like where I want to go next. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays are usually scheduling meetings and meeting with others, running errands, things like that. that's kind of like the loose plan I have for my week, but that kind of helps me structure the boundaries and where everything needs to fall on my calendar. Another thing that I have been doing recently has been outsourcing to AI. This has been my really fun, exciting thing that I've tried this year that I've really been enjoying. But I went to a conference in January, and one of the talks was about how to use AI in your business. And so from that conference, I started using a application, which some of your listeners might be interested in. It's pretty cool. It's called Hoppy Copy, and it's an email writing AI generator thing. So it's way better than ChatGPT in terms of how good the emails are. And it's obviously a paid service, but that's really cool. So when I'm doing emails and email marketing, I will use AI to help me get started, which I find takes a lot of the brain power out of it. This week, actually, I started using Imagine AI for editing, which is alleviating a lot of the time it takes to edit weddings. I definitely use tools strategically, not necessarily that I have a consistent person I outsource to every day, but I always make sure that the tools that I'm using are helping. And I think that's a great place to start if you don't have the capital or the time or the want, the desire to actually outsource to a human. AI could be a good place to start the journey.
I'm fascinated about the clocking in. Absolutely fascinated. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
What do you use? Is it an app?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a web-based app. So it's called Toggle. It's Toggl.
Okay.
And it's absolutely free to use. I don't pay to use it, which is great. And it's just toggle.com is how you can sign up to do it. But basically, it's so cool. I'm a very data-driven person. I love Google Sheets. I love Google Docs. I love lists and all these things. So it's really helpful for me to see not only that I'm clocked in terms of an accountability aspect, but it also gives me reports at the end of every week, what I did. It gives me a pie chart showing me where all my time was going, projects I was working on. And so I love that because I can then assess at the end of the week, okay, was I being productive? What did I actually work on this week? Because sometimes the day can get away from you and you're like, what did I actually do today? I don't even remember. I feel like I had so much time and yet it got away from me. And so it really helps me stay on track.
I think that's fascinating. Maybe I'm thinking of like comes from your legal days of having to know what you're working on and billable hours. One of the things that I think as photographers, because I think we're probably one of the most behind the scenes creatives, like, you know, a painter's going to take hours of doing that work. But photography, it looks like, oh, you're just showing up to the shoot and then clicking a few buttons, right? And there you go. Now, like there's 9 hours of work for every 1 hour. So I actually really like this. And I also love the accountability aspect of it. It's like, what are you doing, Jane? Are you scrolling Facebook? Get off Facebook right now. And I will definitely check that out, toggle.com.
Yeah.
So we talk about the seasonality. Do you find that wedding photography in South Carolina is quite seasonal? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, I would say it is. Our winters are pretty mild. So I think we tend to have weddings year round. But I would say definitely between December and February, they tend to drop off a bit. And so that's usually my slowest season. I would say maybe March through June is pretty busy. And then September to November is pretty busy because our summers can get really hot too. And I personally don't love to book weddings in the heat of July and August in South Carolina. It's just not fun. So especially if it's outside. They are seasonal, but I mean, sometimes it's year round. So yeah.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with a photographer friend of mine, and she's in Florida, and she was like, well, she wants to cancel on Friday because it's 48 degrees. It's freezing. That's cold. And so we have this whole debate on what temperatures do you like and you don't like. Anything under 55. I mean, I live in New York, so, you know, it can be quite cold, but I also a family and newborn photographer. So when it's busy in the fall, usually that first cold weather, the kids have no idea. It's just shock to their system. So I'm like, I'm out indoor only after mid-October. But it was interesting, we were heading on to clients because she was saying, well, she's being so difficult because of the weather. And actually not being that difficult. If you feel the cold, you feel the cold.
Yeah.
I'm leading on, trying to do a good segue. Do you find that you have any red flags for a client? If you get an inquiry, my radar's going off, what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of all starts with the experiences I've had. I've almost been in business for 10 years. So after a while, you start to pick up on what those things are. And I feel like in the beginning, I just didn't know what they were. But I think red flags for me, specifically, I have built a service-based business that's very personal and personal brand. And so when I get an inquiry that's just pretty much price shopping, for me, that's not really an aligned client because, well, although price is important, and I do encourage, and for myself, I have an average investment price listed on my website because I think price transparency is really important. But if it's just the only thing that people care about and the only thing they want to know when they inquire with me, then I tend to see that as a red flag, maybe a yellow flag, because I can almost guarantee that that's the only thing that they're concerned about. And if that's the only thing they're concerned about, that's not necessarily bad. It's just not for me.
Right.
I'm about connecting with people and making that personal friendship and connection and serving people really well. And so my experience is holistic. It's not just a price. I'm with you on your wedding day. I'm your friend. I'm like your built-in buddy that's going to do whatever I need to do to make your day amazing, even if that means I put on your shoe. That can't be just communicated with just, what are your prices? You know, that kind of thing.
Price, question mark. Right?
Yeah, or price. Yes.
How much? Actually, how much is annoying.
How much?
I also have my prices fully listed. I'm fully transparent. Here you go. So when someone asks about price, it's kind of, well, did you actually even look at my website or are you just firing them off? For newborns, it's a very personal experience. And because they're just had a baby, their hormones are crazy, you're with them for a long time. I can't even imagine weddings. Someone treating you like a commodity or just a service, I think it's a little bit of a red flag. But then I've had people that I can turn around of being like, okay, well, I just answer you back all about me and the process, or about them and what I bring. And they're like, okay, well, wow, that sounds amazing. I thought it was just photography that I was hiring for. Yeah, and maybe you were for someone's passport photo. Not the same.
Right.
Although, yes. I don't know why I rank for my area for passport photos, but I have people come in. No, I have a passport photo. I'm like, you don't want to pay my prices for a passport photo. I even have a sticker on the door being like, here you go to this place. There's a great camera shop down the street. Google. Yeah. What did I put in my Google profile that says, now I am a passport photo?
That's hilarious. Yeah. And price is definitely important. You know, like you said, putting transparency and being upfront about prices is very important. But it is so much more than that. You're right. I think that's a good analogy with the passport photo thing.
Yeah.
I went into UPS and I just stood there and he took my photo and that was that.
Or your driver's license.
Yeah, right. Even worse. Yeah, even worse.
Mine's hideous. I have like 3-tone hair. And I didn't have 3-tone hair. I actually had my, like, the shadow. It makes me look like I have, like, it's awful. But, you know, who's going to see it? All right. So speaking of funny shoots or funny driver's license, tell me about the funniest or best shoot that you've ever done. And, like, I cannot believe I did that, or I can't believe that happened.
Oh, man. It wasn't funny in the moment, but funny looking back. There's been plenty of times where I've fallen or dropped my camera. There was one in particular. This was in Clemson back when I was first starting. And I was so excited. I had an engagement shoot. It was one of my first engagement shoots. I was so excited. And we were going to go on this long, I don't know what you would call it. You're next to a lake. And there was this long strip of land kind of in between the lake. And I don't know what you would call it. But basically, it's a strip of land and then a bunch of rocks. And then it goes down to the lake. And so I had this cool idea. I've seen this before. I'm going to go to this location. So I have them meet me there. And it's just a beautiful location. And it's great. And so we're on the rocks. And I'm just shooting away, and this is great. And then I trip and fall, and my camera falls and all this. So it's like embarrassing because it's like one of my first engagement sessions, but it just sticks out in my mind. And so anytime I'm in a precarious stance, or if I'm on the edge of something in an engagement shoot, I just always remember that time. And I'll usually make a note. I have fallen before, so just watch out for me because, like, you know, yeah. I think that's probably the funniest.
Did you break your camera, or was
No, I didn't. People would. Yeah, it was all good. Those Canon cameras, man, they're rugged.
They are rugged. One time I was doing an in-home shoot and I'd put my camera on top of the bed, and all of a sudden the toddler bounces on the bed. It lands. Oh, wow, it's not broken. How did that happen? But then honestly, the next time I put it on, something had cracked on the lens because I had not put the filter on. And I had 3 shoots in the city and I had this cracked lens and I was like, it's all right. I mean, I did call my husband crying my eyes out. I'm like, what can I do? Nothing's open because I'm in New York City and Adorama and B&H, they're closed on Saturdays.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what do I do? And I'm on Google and it's like, you can shoot with it, just no sun. So as long as it's like cloudy, you're fine and you're not getting any real direct sunlight. I will say I definitely overshot that day. And people were like, well, luckily they were all repeat clients because they're like, what's wrong with your lens? And I was like, oh, no, it's fine. I had no idea. And I'm looking like it seems fine, but I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Things we go through.
The things we go through. As we wrap up, I always ask, what's the one tip you would give to a new photographer? Say your cousin, or somebody that's helping you now. You're like, hey, I want to go full-time, Nichole. What should I do?
Yeah. Oh, wow. So many tips. But the main thing I would say is don't put yourself in a box. I think we get the advice to niche down and to find our specialty. And while I think there's definitely a place for that, when you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out where you're going with this, you need to try all the things and try everything and get experience any way that you can and then make a decision. And then also beyond that, obviously me as a photographer and attorney, obviously those are very different things, but they work well for me. But that came from me owning that and me actually like accepting that about myself, that I can be both, that I can do both things, and that I don't have to like put myself in just the photographer box or just the attorney box. Especially when I was starting out, it's like, okay, I see this person, I need to kind of mimic them or do what they're doing or have this same type of business or follow their path. And it's just not, I mean, there's something to be said of learning, right? And learning from other people, but it really will hold you back from your potential if you're just putting yourself into this little mold and you're not embracing all the parts of you and all the different experiences you have. So I think that's where it starts, especially if you're trying to go full time. You need to be, okay, I can do this and all of me is acceptable for this. Like I'm equipped and it can happen for me. I can go full time, and just kind of like mindset thing.
Yeah, it's a mindset thing and it's also focusing on the goals. And like you said actually earlier, it's like you don't actually have to be full time. Like it can be part time. I remember mentoring someone that had given up a really good teaching job to spend time with her family. She thought photography would do it, didn't charge enough. There's a long story short. If she'd have realized, actually, my teaching does give me much more freedom than I think, or go part-time teaching, or take that talent that she has, she's a very good teacher, and sort of balance it. Unfortunately, she did go out of business in 3 years, wasn't able to go back to teaching because all the jobs had been taken and then she had to do something else. But then I've mentored someone who was a full-time NICU nurse and newborn photographer. And we talked about, she's like, I'm sick of my job, this, that, and the other. And then we talked about like, well, the benefits of your job is insurance and this. And she ended up coming around being like, you know what, this job actually, I can go part-time and I can be part-time photographer. And then like talking to her like 2 months after, it took the pressure off being full-time photography or being a full-time nurse. And she actually she said, I actually look forward to being a nurse now. Because she sort of accepted it because it doesn't have to be full time. So
100%. Yeah. I think we get this idea that it has to be 100% everything. Okay. If we're doing this, it has to be all in.
Right.
And yes, I mean, you need to be dedicated and you need to have stamina and longevity. But it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and.
Yeah.
And I think there's actually a lot of beauty in that. Also, the pressure thing is so beautiful. Taking the pressure off yourself to make a sustainable living and having that backup income, I think is so great. And it allows you to be a little bit more creative because you're not worried about losing customers or
raise your price.
Yeah,
to be honest, exactly. I think it's funny. People are like, oh, I'm part-time. I'm that's why I don't charge. I'm like, well, you should be more because your time is little. And also the costs that you have, like whatever costs you have are not split over as many shoots. So
that's so true.
If you have the comfort of an income and you can invest in education, and you should actually be charging more. That's my tip, is because you have the flexibility and your time. Say you have kids and you're working full time and you're doing this on the side, your time is much more valuable because than somebody that's doing this full time, because that's, you only have certain hours in the day. All right. Well, this has been amazing, Nichole. Thank you so much. In wrapping up, just tell our audience, I will put it in the show notes, but tell our audience how they can find you.
Yeah. So my name is Nichole Lauren with an H. So it's Nichole. So you'll have to put a link because sometimes it trips people up. But Instagram.com/_Nichole Lauren is my Instagram account. And then NicholeLaurenPhotography.com is my website. You can find my educational shop on there, wedding info and coaching info on there as well. And then LegallyCreative.com is the contract templates. And then my podcast is the Self-Starter Podcast. So Jane's going to be on my podcast, so you can come listen to her episode on there as well. But would love to have you follow along.
Thanks, Nichole. I loved hearing your story. Not being put in the box, I think, is really, really fascinating and really true. We are multifaceted human beings, so I appreciate that. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on.